Hey, Jake Kaminski here, trying to hide from the rain here in my building. So as we get some people in, hopefully they'll let me know if they can actually hear me or not. If they can't hear me, then we'll have to move it a little bit later. The rain should clear up in maybe 5-10 minutes, maybe a little bit later. So might be able to actually hear me instead of the rain bouncing off of the roof. So for those of you guys that are just joining, if you could let me know if you can hear me, because it is raining outside. I'm in a metal building. And I don't want to do this if people can't hear me. I am inside so I don't get wet, but yeah, just let me know if you can hear me. Give me a thumbs up or just comment that you can hear me before I continue. Hey, Heather. All right, cool. If at any time you guys can't hear me, just let me know. I could, once I start getting to talking a little bit more after the little demo that I do, then I can go in the office itself so you can actually hear me. So, and it's just drizzling right now. There's some nasty stuff that's still coming, so I appreciate the feedback. So anyway, we're gonna do stuff today that is not specific to recurve or compound. There is a lot of recurve stuff that we'll cover as far as my results specific to my Vane testing. But this first part will be essentially how to decide what or how to fletch your arrows. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to shoot. I've got it's about 10 yards. I can figure this out in 10 yards. But basically here is a Reinhardt Brute target. It's got a nice replaceable core that I've been shooting out, so when I wear it out I can replace it. But I've got some dots here that I'm going to shoot at with my bow, and I have all bare shafts. They're all recently, all the fletchings have recently been removed, and all the nocks are brand new and are identical. All right, so I fletch them up, or I set them up in the exact same way. So if you can see here, let me see if I can get it to focus. There, you see this gold line here is also indicated by a line on my nock itself. See how there's no line on this side, just a dot, but this side has a full line with the gold mark. So every single one of them, I have the gold mark with the line and the nock, all indexed exactly the same. So why that's important, I will show you. But basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot these dots. My closest shot, I'm going to shoot this dot, and then I'm going to take a step back, shoot this dot, a step back, and so on until I run out of space. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pay attention to the index of the nock sticking into each corresponding hole. So if this hole is slightly rotated different than this hole and so on, you'll actually be able to see a pattern. And then we'll talk about fletching arrows to coincide with that. So what I'm going to do, what this is doing is checking the natural rotation of the bow. In my testing, it works for every type of bow, compound, recurve, whatever. If you're a finger shooter, if you're a release shooter, you're a hook or a button or a hinge or D-loop, not D-loop, torqueless D-loop, whatever you want. It works for everything, all right? And what I'm doing is I'm checking the natural rotation of the bow. Again, if you can't hear me, just let me know. It's raining outside in case you're wondering what that noise is. But what I'm doing is if the arrow is normally rotating this, clockwise out of the bow, why would I fletch the arrows to spin the arrow, or why would I fletch the vanes to spin the arrow counterclockwise? If it's going to come out of the bow this direction, I would want to enhance that spin to make it spin that way and to continue that spin. Why would I have the natural tendency for the arrow to come out of the bow this way, have the vanes pushing it the other direction? So it's going to travel this way for a little while, stop, continue to travel, and then rotate the other direction. So it's a really simple principle, and a lot of people don't take the time to do it, but I'm going to show you exactly how easy it is to do it. You don't need a high-speed camera to do the test. That's the cool part about it. I've tried it with a high-speed camera, but because it's very, very specific to how the focus is, there's not a depth of field that you can actually use on a high-speed camera, at least the ones that I've used. Maybe the lens was cheap, I don't know. But I mean, the unit was like 10 grand, so I don't know. Like I said, I've never been able to use it with a high-speed camera to get it done, especially because you can't get it high enough resolution up close. You know, you can't zoom in on a frame that's 20 yards long to see an arrow rotating. It doesn't work. The best test that I've done is just doing this quick, easy test here. So, got my stuff on. What I'm going to do, I'm going to shoot up pretty much with my stabilizer almost touching the target, and then I'm going to take like a half a step back and shoot another arrow, and then another half step back and shoot another arrow, and then I'll show you. It's really easy and super simple to do. And I mean, archery is a game of fractions of a percent of difference between first place and fifth place. So, you know, I try to squeeze every tiny little thing out of my bow that I possibly can. And again, you can do it too with a recurve, a compound, it doesn't matter. So yeah, we'll get to it. Excuse the chaos in this place. But yeah, if you want, as this is rolling and as I'm doing this, you can feed in some questions and you know, specific to why I'm doing this or whatever. But we'll try to keep questions on topic just for now, and then of course afterwards we can do, you know, a little bit of random Q&A as well. So again, I'm starting up real close enough that my stabilizer would touch the nocks of arrows in the target. Take a step back. Another step back. How's everybody doing today? Anybody in the southeast getting pummeled with rain like we are? I think we've got like 4 or 5 inches a day already. And again, another couple steps. How do I come up with the initial line on the arrows? That's a complicated topic that we'll get about a little later, but I'm just showing you a reference point for now. So you don't have to line them specifically. Just using any reference point at all on the arrow. It's unimportant at this point why the line is there. And again, I'm not left-handed, this is mirrored. So almost as far back as I can get in my building. We'll get like 3 or 4 more shots. And I'm doing this cold, so hopefully it'll work out. It did earlier in my short little test, but and the last shot here as far as I can go. Alright, so I'll go check this out. Yeah, Tony, this is, yeah, same setup. Doesn't matter, righty, lefty, compound, recurve, fingers, release, button, hinge, hook, whatever you want. It all works. So, let me put my bow down. Let me see if it actually worked. Yeah, it worked. There's my third shot was a little off, so it's not as perfect. Let me pull this down, and I'll flip the camera around. Alrighty, so this is, again, I started here and moved across to the right, and moved down and moved across and moved down and went across. So I'll just point out to it. So right here, this first one is at, we'll say like 5 o'clock. The second one is at, or excuse me, it's like 7 o'clock. This one's about 5 o'clock. This one's 4 o'clock. Still at 4. So that could have been a mistake. So sometimes I'll do this a few times just to check. But this one's still at 4. It's actually a little bit flatter, more towards 3:30 than that one. That one's probably at 4:30. This one's at 3:30. This one's at 1 o'clock. And again, I said not my sixth shot, my third shot, but my sixth shot, it felt a little off. But it still is, you know, we'll discard it just in case. But as you can tell, this last one, 1 o'clock. Sorry, the focus is not behaving. There. Now you can see this one is at 11 or 10. This one's again at 11 or 10. I didn't take a full step back. And then this one is about 8 o'clock again. So, that you can see a general indication of a direction that it is slowly rotating. Now in my testing, in about 20 yards, my arrows rotate maybe 2 to 3 revolutions in about 20 yards naturally without any sort of vanes on them. And I can't do it today to prove it to you because you know, I've got 30 feet basically inside wall to wall, so it's not quite long enough. But if you can agree with this, that in general the arrow is rotating well, let's see here. To you guys, this is counterclockwise, right? Yeah. So counterclockwise, the arrows are rotating. So I'll fletch the arrows to rotate the arrows counterclockwise. I have the ability and the flexibility to use vanes because I use the AAE wave vanes, and I'll show you some plotting charts as to why I use the wave vanes. But because I'm using vanes, I have the ability to choose right or left helical to make the arrow spin right or left. With a spin type vane, you're kind of stuck with the type of spin based on your handedness because of arrow clearance, all right, or vane clearance. I've tried, and unless you have a really, really good tune and you're getting a huge amount of clearance away from the button when you shoot, it's really hard to shoot like a left-handed spin wing out of a right-handed bow. I've done the testing, but it just, if you start making mistakes, there's just not the clearance there with the vane that there is with the right-handed vane to make up the difference to be able to use it. So, simple test, like I said. You don't need anything fancy, you just need a blank bail and you need arrows. Now I wouldn't shoot into a blank bail that had like a giant gaping hole in the middle. That wouldn't stop the arrows in a consistent manner. So because this target is relatively fresh, especially like from the side is brand new, it's going to stop the arrows at the same distance, meaning they're not going to penetrate different distances, so I'm getting different rotations essentially. But yeah, so any questions on that? I'll cover, like, maybe before you ask some questions, some theory on that. I think for a recurve, I think it's up to each individual person. How you hold the string, how you hook, how you anchor, how much twist you maybe have in the string, lots of things like that. In my testing, it doesn't matter what direction you rotate the spin, rotate the string to give it the right or left spin. Limbs sometimes don't matter if they're straight. If they're not straight or they have a little bit of a twist to them, they can have a tendency to spin them one direction or the other. So with a bow that's properly aligned and set up with a center shot right and, you know, generally a pretty good tune, in my testing, they almost always rotate out of a recurve for me in this specific manner. With a compound, it's slightly different, especially on a split limb bow, based on feedback and testing and things and information that I've heard through the grapevine of other people, that everything runs and works about the same as a recurve, with the exception of when you start changing limbs. especially I have a stiffer limb on the right side than the left side, and then when you really start changing the dynamic of the bow, it can change the rotation of the bow or the arrow itself. So it's always good to check with a new setup, and I do anytime it's a serious tournament coming up or a new season with a new bow. You know, this is the first year I'm shooting the Win and Win TFT and NS combo, so I wanted to take the time before the first shoot of the year, the outdoors, and make sure that it was spinning the arrow counterclockwise. Because in my testing in the past, it's always been counterclockwise for me. And everybody always asks me, why are you shooting left wing spin arrows or left wing feathers indoors? Why aren't you using right wing? Well, I get better clearance with left wing feathers, and the arrow naturally rotates counterclockwise, so I keep continuing that rotation counterclockwise. And I truly believe it makes a difference. In my testing and arrow plotting of vanes, and this is something that I really love about vanes, they're so easy to test and compare. You just fletch up multiple different types of vanes on different arrows. You shoot them mixed against each other, so you don't have outside influence when, say, if I'm changing stabilizers, I can't shoot a shot back to back to back to back and change stabilization without pausing slightly or having a different feeling or whatever. Arrows, I just grab a different arrow and shoot it, and grab a different type of arrow and shoot it. It's easy. So I'll show you some paper testing that I've done. I had, or not paper testing, but arrow plotting, and I had a dozen arrows at a time. I shot 4 different vanes, and so that means I had 3 arrows alike of each vane. I tested the wave vane against the spider vane, the spin wing, and the XS wing. And I plotted them, and it's easy to test. You can shoot them all in the wind and see if they drift any different, lots of different things. Let's see, there was a question up here. Tony, I don't know if they would still spin with a straight vane. They probably would, but they would have a tendency to wander. So I always, meaning wandering back and forth, depending on, say, like if you hit one of the vanes of the 3, it would want to plane one direction and rotate one direction, and it might change depending on which vane you hit or which side you hit it from. So I always recommend at least a little bit of helical or a little bit of offset to have at least a direction, regardless of which way it comes out of your bow naturally. But again, if it comes out of your bow counterclockwise, set it up to spin it more counterclockwise. I don't know, Raid. You could probably try it. I don't know if there's a level of skill or score or anything else like that that you'd have to be at for proficiency to actually see it. But I mean, like I said, archery is a game of millimeters at times, and if you're plus or minus 2 millimeters, you're tied. But more than 2 millimeters on a shoot off, you're done. So yeah, it's a game of millimeters. Why would you leave anything out of it? So. Well, anyways, that all makes sense to everybody as to what I do and why I do it. I think so. So I'm going to fletch them up counterclockwise, left wing, easy. But I'm going to show you some plots real quick. And this is something that you guys can do. Let me lower this here. Sorry if I'm shaking it. You should buy, well, it depends on which spin wings. I kind of covered that as far as what direction you want it to rotate. I'm going to put the tripod up so it's going to shake a little bit. So if you get motion sick, you might want to look away for a moment. Like I said, if you're a right-handed shooter, you're really going to have a hard time getting left wings to spin. As far as offset and how much to do, we'll cover that in a second. So it'll be difficult to say if you should use a left offset with a left helical, or I mean a left offset with a left spin wing or a spin type vane. It's up to you, and also your individual draw weight, your draw length, ultimately the speed and weight of your arrows. So it's very complicated, and the only way that you can do it is to test them side by side. So I'll show you. If the arrow should spin counterclockwise, which side should the vane offset to? Well, if you just look at it like this, if this is the arrow, this is the knock. If the vane is offset this direction, where this is the front of the vane and this is the back of the vane, the wind is going to push the arrow that direction because it's going to steer it that way. So it's going to rotate clockwise. If you have it this way, it'll rotate counterclockwise. But in general, counterclockwise is left helical, clockwise is right helical. So here's some plot charts that I did last year when the spider vanes came out. Brady sent me some so I could test them. And essentially each, if I didn't mark them on the top, it's the same as the one above. So you can see this is the wave vane, spider vane, spin wing. This is the VLD spin wing, very light drag, and the XS vane. I can't remember which one this it is. I don't know, maybe the 60 millimeter or something like that. But you can see it goes all the way down. So these top two are the same: wave, spider, spin, and XS. And I shot equal amounts of each arrow. Each arrow was shot the same unless I made a mistake. See, like this one I made a mistake and I made an X. Let's see, there's probably a couple more. So I always make an indication. If I make a mistake, I mark it with an X. So I'm using a scope when I'm looking through it. X's, X's. Actually, no, that was to see if my pen worked, I think, because it was dying, because I'm trying to use a tiny dot to indicate. There's another X. So I'm trying to be as honest as I can in showing what's a good shot and what's a bad shot. So if you look here, yeah, you could just really see a slight difference between the wave and the spider, but then you start getting into the spin wing, you can see it just opens up. There's not as much dense population in the center. And again, this is specific to me. I'm just showing you how to test vanes. But this is what I do. I go into, I think I did this in Pages on my Mac, and did a bunch of circles. I put an X in the middle for the center of the target just because, and I did a bunch of concentric circles that got bigger. I didn't care if they were different spots or whatever, but I think I did it as X, 10, 9, 8, 7. And I didn't move my sight in between each arrow. I just shot them as is. So you can see the waves, I was a little high, the spiders I was centered, the spin wing I was centered, and the XS I was a little low. So you can see the difference in drag between the arrows. The waves were a little bit less drag, or I had a little bit more speed out of them compared to the XS vanes. Downrange I was losing velocity, so that's why I started hitting lower with the XS wings. So you can really see initially, immediately, I didn't group as good with the spin wings, especially compared to the rest. The XS was pretty similar, and then you get looking at these two, the waves and the spider. I mean, I was really similar here as far as the density towards the center of the target, but you can see the circular, this had a little bit more concentricity to it than the spider. I didn't have as many flyers. Even when I made mistakes, you know, I marked them like I said. But you start getting into the second day, so we already know that I didn't group as well with the spin wings. It just didn't group that well. But I start getting to this second day, and the XS had a little bit more dense, dense towards the center, but I had a lot of high flyers. So I also checked each arrow and made sure that it wasn't always arrow number 1 of the 3 that was always hitting high or whatever. But I tested a few different ones as I was going down here. You can see the Wave Max, which was a prototype that I had them make, and then I started, yeah. But in my testing in the, I've gotten away from the Ely vanes. I've gotten away from the curly vanes. Curly vanes just were really heavy for me and didn't seem to, they weren't as consistent as spin wings for me. I didn't shoot Gas Pros in the past. I have, so this isn't a comprehensive test of every vane out there, because there's like 100 different vanes. I mean, there's a million of them. I can tell you that a compound vane out of a recurve doesn't work. It's too heavy. It stiffens the back of the arrow, makes it less forgiving. But when you're on, they shoot really good, but when you're a little bit off, they're not forgiving. So I don't even bother with testing those anymore. I'm going with the waves, because the wave is a super light vane that's specific for recurves. It's actually lighter than a spin wing, because you got to have the spin wing plus the double-sided tape plus the black tape to tape the end. With a wave, even with glue when it's wet, is lighter than spin wings. So To me, weight in the back on a recurve means less forgiveness. Stiffens the arrow up and ultimately affects the forgiveness of the arrow. That's why I shoot the X10s, because it's weaker in the back half than the front half. And again, it just takes out the, and that's why I never cut them off the back, because if I stiffen them up in the back, they don't shoot as consistent. Koreans shoot 100% spin wings. Do they test other types, or do they always stay on the conservative way? I think they always just do what they do. It's always spin wings, it's always biter over nocks, it's always 23 centimeter brace height, it's always a 70-inch bow with a 25-inch riser and long limbs. It's always with fast flight and 20 strands. Period. End of story. If you don't use it, you don't shoot. That's the way their game works. They just have so many archers and so many shooters, so they don't shoot anything else other than that, because that's the only way. Yeah. So, like I said, we're real close on spiders and waves. I had a couple mistakes here. There's some dirt on this. As you can tell, it's a little yellowed. But you can see it's, again, still pretty concentric. This tightened up a little bit. I still had a little bit more left to right than I did here for whatever reason. I get into another day. I completely discarded the excess vanes. I had them starting to fall apart on me, and I didn't like the flyers that I was having. I was having more flyers than I was here or here, so I considered that to not work well for me, especially I think this day was a little bit windier than this day. So I had a lot more wind drift inconsistently with the excess vanes. All of these I aimed in the center, and didn't aim off. So I was trying to also get a good reading on how much wind drift there was. So I believe that's why this one's a little tighter left to right than this one is. And then that's why this one started to open up, because they were the 60 millimeters. So started trying a wave max, which is basically a mini max compound shape that was cut out of the waves. And it shot pretty well. As you can tell, you know, I started testing it and it wasn't grouping as well as over here, so I stopped eventually using the Wave Max for a while. But again, you can see pretty concentric, a lot of density in the center, a lot of density in the center, less density in the center. So you can actually see these groups between the waves and the spider were tighter than the spin wing. But as I kept going and testing more, you can see it's a little tighter here than here. And again, a little tighter up in here than it was here. Yes, this was tight here, but look at all the flyers that I was having here compared to these. So I just kept going back to waves every time, just shot better for me. So after I started doing that, okay, there was a couple questions real quick about, yes, I always cut off the front of X10s, and I would recommend the same for ACE arrows as well. Unless you're a compound, then get the Pro Tours, or just cut straight 4 inches off the back of the X10s and go from there, because then they make them Pro Tours. That does stiffen them up, of course, but that's what I would do. Let's see, hang on, a couple other questions. Yeah, Michael, the waves are a little tough to glue on the arrows. I'll show you how I do it and why I do it, but it works just fine. It's just the base is so tiny, so it makes it very difficult to fletch, and that's just the nature of the beast of the product. In order to make them so light, we had to make the base super, super small. So you get a little bit of glue everywhere, which is not a problem. For me, there's a couple tips I'll show you on how to deal with that, but yeah. And again, just another day, just plotting some arrows. This was after a couple weeks, I believe, or a week later. Again, more concentric than this. This had a little bit more left and right. There was some wind this day from what I remember. And the larger profile of the spider vanes, I was just having more wind drift, so I decided to go with something that still grouped just as good, if not better than this one, but had less wind drift. This was the spin wing. No, I don't remember. Oh, wait, no, sorry. It looks like here. Okay, yeah, I had my clipboard clamp up here, as you can see the line right across here. So I didn't write above it, I wrote below it. Wave, Spider, XS, and the Wave Max. So I tried the XS again. It had a good dense center, which I always saw with the XS, but again, the wind, and just having flyers. You can see I was out in the 8 ring a little bit more than this. This was still pretty centered in the 9 ring, and this was still pretty centered in the 9 ring. I just had a few more 8s over here. And if I would have centered this to here, these would have gone into the 7 ring. If I would have centered this to here, I would have had them all in the gold pretty much, with the exception of the mistakes. Again, I marked the mistakes with X's. This was a heavier volume day, so there's a lot more plots that I have in this one compared to like this one down here, a lot less arrows shot. Why one arrow would always rip one vein? Probably because it's not rotated the same would be my guess. If not, then it maybe if, I don't know, it could be an issue with the knock or something like that. Or yeah, a point could be bent or something along that. But anyway, as I eliminated these, I started going back to, okay, yeah, so I did waves here. These 4 plots are waves of 5 degree a helical and 8.5 degrees a helical, and comparing the two. Now this is at 70 meters out of my bow, which is specific to me. It doesn't work for everybody, and it's not always the best for everyone. But from what I can tell between the two, it's very, very similar. I couldn't tell too much of a difference between this one and that one. It's a little bit more dense here, but it's got a little bit more flyers. This one seems to be a bit more consistent. And then same here. Little bit more dense, well, a little bit more dense here than this one. This one's a little bit centered, but maybe a little bit open than this one. And because I really couldn't tell a difference between 5 degrees and 8.5 degrees, I've been fletching all my arrows with 8 degrees from now on. In the past, I have done all the testing going between a 5 degree offset and a 1 degree and a 3 degree and a 0 degree. When we had to shoot 90 meters, I found a 2 degree helical to work best for me at 90. Anything more than that, my groups would open up. So when we shot FITAs, I shot a 2 degree offset, but since now we've gone to 70, I've tried the 2 degree versus the 5 degree. 5 degree just shot better than it, hands down. So that's where I went with it. Same thing on indoors or fields. I would test up close. More helical seems to shoot better for me up close. Now how I can do that is with actual helical, and the only jig that I know on the market that'll do actual helical in different increments is the Last Chance Archery Vane Master Pro. So I'm going to show you that one here in a second. Let me see if there's any more questions real quick. Do I use the normal spin wings or the Pro? When I was doing testing, I was doing the spin wing VLD, which is the very light drag, because in my testing in the past, the VLD shot better for me when I was up above 45 pounds or more. And it's a very light drag. It's a little thinner. It has a little cut in the very back of the vane towards the base that indicates very light drag. They cut them slightly different, and they shot better for me. Maybe you're suggesting the Pro as in the Hunter, Spin Wing Pro, Spin Wing Elite. The Spin Wing Elite, don't use those. They spin the arrows way too much, and anyone that I know, and including me, even at 45 pounds, as my arrow got out to about 60 meters, they started parachuting and flying like a helicopter, where the back end would spin and then the whole arrow would be dragged down by the vane. Instead of flying in an arcing fashion, it would go up and then fly down like this to the target. Too much drag, and ultimately really screwed my scores at 90 meters. And after that, somebody noticed that I was having that issue. I took all the vanes off and shot the highest score that I ever shot at 90 meters in 6 arrows for a year or so, until I started shooting better at 90. This was years ago, with bare shafts compared to shooting my my Spin Wing Elites. They're just too much drag. So if you're gonna go spin wings, go regular, or go VLDs if you're higher bow weight. Let's see. Do I use bare? Wait a minute. Do I use bare? Wow, these can't keep up with these comments. They keep popping up. Do I shoot through paper to tune the knock before fletching? No, I do use a RAM spine tester, and I check the spine of the arrow, mark the stiffest spot of the arrow, and put that against the plunger. I also do straightness checks on the front and back half of the shafts, as well as the center. and that's how I sort my arrows. Now, you can float them in a bathtub, that's old school, but weight doesn't necessarily mean stiffness. The best way is to check them with a spine tester. You can't shoot them all through paper like somebody was just saying, and just make sure, you know, they don't have to be a bullet hole, just make sure they're always the same tear when you shoot them through paper. But I have a spine checker, and then I bare shaft select them. I shoot a handful of times and pick the ones that group together the most. So that's how I select my arrows. All right, let me show you my fletching jig here. Make some space. Am I losing anybody, or is this all making sense? Oh, all right, cool. I see some thumbs up. Can't be that far off. All right. So this is the Vane Master Pro. You're gonna have to forgive me. I should have looked this up on retail price, but I don't know. I know it's not cheap, but the reason that it's not cheap is it'll make sense here in a second. Let me flip the camera over so I can plug this in just to be sure I have enough power. Yeah, oh, come on, flip over. Nope, won't flip. Sorry, guys. So the Vane Master Pro is more expensive. I think it's up close to $200 or so, give or take. But there's a reason why it's this much. All right, if you get a Bitzenberger, which is a popular fletching jig, your Bitzenberger is about $80. Your different helical clamps, right and left helical, are I think $20 to $30 a piece. Plus you got to buy the knock receivers that match them, are another $20 a piece. But those truly don't have a true 120 degree increments to make a full 360 degrees around the arrow. Somebody said this is $240. So again, you add all that up. You add the $80 plus the $30 for straight left and right, plus the knock receivers, which truly aren't 120 degrees around the arrow. You're always going to have two vanes that are close together and one that's far away, because they are not cast correctly, where the detents in the clicking mechanism where this stops at is not truly 120 degrees apart in the Bitzenberger. So then you got to go buy yourself a zenith fixer or corrector tool. It's cool and it holds your pins on your nocks, which is pretty neat, but you know, there's another $35 I think. So you're looking at pretty much what you can get here. And then with the Bitzenberger, it's not adjustable helical. The actual curve of the feather or the vane or whatever is what it is. I don't even know what it is. And then you have to offset it to get full contact of the base of the vane on the shaft. Whereas this one is very unique, and you can see that I can just adjust this left and right to get my offset or my degree of helical, because then as I push this close to the arrow, these wires, which actually hold the vane, twist back and forth and rotate. So they actually twist. And I'll show you. So if you put a vane in, and let me grab one real quick. I take a vane and I put it in here, because you can see it, all it does is pinch the vane here. And this has some non-stick coating on it to prevent buildup of glue. But you can see it just pinches the vane. And as I rotate it, sorry, I'm trying to show you. As I rotate it, you can see how it's still flat through the base and straight. So all I do is I match the offset that I want, and you can see these different holes, and then adjust this so I have full contact of the vane. So if I want right helical, 1 degree, or do I want 10 degrees, or do I want 4 degrees of left helical, or maybe 4.5 or 5. So it's all pretty simple. It's a pretty neat design. So what this is here, these pegs, it's standard 0 degrees towards the center, up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees of helical, either right or left helical. Towards the right here is actually left, and towards the left here is actually right. But what I do is I take an angle finder. I actually use an app on my phone when I don't have my angle finder handy, and I will set the base of the jig on a flat surface or a level surface, and then I'll use my angle finder here and dial up more than 5 degrees of helical. Not everybody knows that, and not everybody has even tried it, but I can get full contact up to 8 3/4, almost 9 degrees of helical, right and left-handed on an X10. And so that happens just to be the 8.5 or 8 degrees or 8.5 happens to be right on the base of this hole, the 5th degree hole. So I've just memorized it. Now normally there's a peg that you slide into these holes and you put the peg in depending on what helical you want, bump it up against it, tighten down the knob, call it a day. But because I'm doing more than that and I'm using it not as directed, even though it works just fine for me, I set it here at, there's 8 degrees. And that's left helical for me. Anybody see that? Makes sense? Is there a spot that has 1 through 10 degree in offset just in case you have to move it and then put it back in the position if you're fletching people's different arrows? Yes, you can. There's these pegs here. And standard, and they only advertise this is up to 5 degrees of helical, but I'm hot rodding it and running 8.5 degrees of helical, so it's really easy. And like I said, the way you do it is put it on a flat surface, stick an angle finder on it, find your angle, tighten it down, call it a day. There's 8 degrees of helical. So you can't get that anywhere else. And now when you take an arrow and you fletch it with these V blocks, so it's always centered, unlike the Bitzenberger that is not centered. And then, unless you buy the Zenith corrector, there's your elastic cord that holds the arrow against the V block here. And then you take this and slide it up against the arrow and you turn it until the center of these essentially V blocks are centered on the shaft. So I center them visually, keep sliding it in until it touches. And there, so you can see on this side it's centered, and on this side it's hard to see at this in this lighting on the camera, but it's centered up front. So if they're centered on both ends, that means it's going to be centered in the middle. Now I have full contact on 8 degrees of helical. Okay, maybe if I want 2 degrees of right, I'll go 2 degrees and then just turn these and make contact better. So that's what I'm running. Any questions on that? Let me check real quick. Yeah, all right. No questions so far. So yeah, it's easy. I've also taken the liberty of shortening up these little ears here on the V block. They were a lot larger and stuck out a lot further. So because I shortened them, now I can run the arrow a lot closer and get the, get the vanes a lot closer to the back half of the shaft. So the brand of the Fletcher is a Last Chance Archery. Last Chance Archery Vane Master Pro. And I'm telling you, if you're gonna buy a fletching jig, you'll never buy another one. This thing is it. It's a Cadillac, man. I mean, it can do anything you want, right and left-handed, or right and left helical, up to like a 3.5-inch vane or something like that. Do compound vanes, recurve vanes, anything you need. So I think it retails about $240, I think is what somebody said. They make a 4-fletch clicker thing here. This one's a 3-fletch, and it's exactly 120 degrees per click. And then if you were to loosen up this part back here, you can pull this off and ratchet it to a different setting. Let's see. It's internally, and I don't want to lose my spot because I have it set exactly how I want it. So you can index it, so every time you fletch a vane, even with glue-on nocks, it's always in the exact same place. Yeah, any experience with wave versus small versus high degrees of offset? Yes, like I said, Kurt, you might have joined in a little earlier. More offset, the better for me. Again, I'm not going to say it's best for everybody, but I think more offset is better on a recurve, especially with the wave vanes. And fun fact or quick tip, the Bitzenberger left helical is actually more helical than the right helical if you shave the clamp to get full contact. The distance from the knock groove to the back of the vane. Let me see. I can't remember. I think I have mine set somewhere about 1 inch. It's actually right around 7/8 of an inch is where the back of my vane is to the groove of the knock. I haven't haven't had enough time to try different offs or different distances from the actual throat of the nock to where the back of the vane sits. So I just go back as far as I can. I feel like the vane has a lot less leverage against the whole arrow when the vanes are further back. But yeah, so when I fletch, I always grab arrow wipes, AAE arrow wipes for the wave vanes or for the shafts. It's super easy and they're cool and a nice little, you know, dispenser. And I always give a quick wipe down of the shaft. It's not an acetone base, so you don't have to wait for it to dry or like wipe off residue. You don't have to worry about cracking nocks when you wipe them, because if you use acetone and you're wiping arrows clean like this and you get it on the nock, it'll actually start harming the plastic and crack all your nocks. So yeah, I mean, you can see it pretty dirty. Always clean the shaft before. Some people have had issues with adhering vanes to shafts sometimes, or the vanes to the glue. So they could have a primer pen. I'll turn it around and show you again too, but they got a primer pen that you just basically can wipe on every vane before you glue it, let it dry. I never have an issue with mine sticking. That's also because I always keep a fresh bottle of Max Bond on hand, because if you're using old Max Bond, it does have an expiration date, but you can extend the expiration date by keeping it in the fridge. So a lot of people don't know that, but you always keep your vane glue in the fridge so it lasts longer. It doesn't dry out. It doesn't, as long as it stays upright and you got like a hole in the top and a cap on it, you're not going to have any issues. It will extend the life of it just by putting it in the fridge. And AAE's factory, they've got a fridge dedicated to just Max Bond. So, I mean, you might as well do it. Gregory, I've never had any issues with it gluing itself to, well, I've had it stick to the surface of the wire, you know, the plastic cover on the wire. But if you wait just a little bit longer and let it finish drying and gluing to the shaft, the bond from the vane to the shaft is always going to be stronger than the bond from the glue to the wire coating itself. So it'll pop right off if you let it dry just a little bit longer. You can also, so another tip for people using bits and burgers out there is to take some bowstring wax and put it on the actual clamp. And then when you get glue all over the place, if you make a mistake or if you're using these wave vanes, like I said, the base is really small, it will prevent the glue from sticking to the jig. So it's just some bow wax. You put it on there until it wears out, put some more on, wipe it off, and it just has a little bit of a barrier to keep the glue from sticking to the. So let me show you some of the wave vanes real quick while this is finishing drying. We'll grab another arrow. It's a little humid here from it raining, so it's not drying quickly. The brand again is VaneMaster Pro. I mean, Last Chance Archery is the brand. VaneMaster Pro is the actual jig itself. So I got to figure out here which way to. Okay, so I've also not only indicated here where I want the arrow to be, but I've also marked the jig here with a gold dot to what direction the line goes. This line is always away from the bow, away from the plunger. That's how I set it up. It doesn't necessarily need to be that way for everybody, but specifically for me, I like to have it away from the plunger. That's just how I check everything. I feel the groove in the nock and then put it away from the plunger and click it on the string. But I would highly recommend always putting your nocks on the same way. So always put this line or the indicator one direction or the other. Yeah, so let me double check. I'm still centered. If you do the wave vanes, so the wave vanes, I don't have a compound vane handy to show you, but you can see how delicate and small the vanes are, or I mean the base is. And because it is a rubber vane, it is a little bit more durable than your standard vane. your standard spin wing for a recurve, but these are definitely not the same as compound vanes. I would not. They shoot good out of a compound, but they don't handle up to the abuse of a compound, especially when you're grouping really tight and just pounding arrows together against each other. But yeah, they're really thin, super light. Like I said, these are, I think 3 spin wings with the tape is somewhere around 3.5 or 4 grains or something like that. These 3 of them together are less than 3 grains. And then you got the glue, but the glue evaporates and turns to basically nothing. They're already primed from the factory and cleaned from the factory. So unless they're super old or you have any doubts about it, you know, glue sticking and things like that, I don't bother priming the vanes. But you can see these used to have 2 different marks, a red and a black mark. They wore out because long story short, I ruined the coating and had to order new wires or new coating. But I made a mark on my own with a Sharpie underneath to always put the vane in the exact place every time. So I make the back about the same, and now I gotta cut my tip on my glue. I forgot to do that before I started. So let me do that real quick. Any questions yet? I'm moving relatively quickly, so I hope everybody's keeping up. I always cut the smallest hole possible on the glue so I can control it as easy as possible. The vane size are 1.7 inches. So again, the smallest hole I can on the glue. It just is a little bit easier to control it and it doesn't go everywhere. I don't use regular vanes. These vanes are specifically designed for recurve. They're the WAV, the Wave, World Archery Vane, AAE. I already covered it. They're lighter than a standard vane. Like a regular compound vane is more than 3 vanes or 3 grains each. These are less than a grain a piece from what I remember. Lighter than a spin wing. Lighter means more forgiving because you're stiffening up the back of the arrow less. Lower profile. I get a lot less wind drift. And they are more durable. I don't worry about gluing them on the shaft because a lot of people have issues and concerns with taking vanes off of carbon shafts because they don't want to splinter the carbon or shave the carbon off. But because the base is so thin, when you hit them with a knife, it just pops right off. You don't have to scrape and cut and scrape all the little pieces from the wide base because this base is probably 1/3 of the normal width of a compound vane. The base of this is almost like the width of a normal compound vane towards the top. That's how thin the actual vane is. Maybe towards the end, if anybody's still around, I could compare the two if anybody really cares. But yeah. So, vane's already in, and then I just do a bead of glue. Some people do 5 dots and then rub it with a toothpick so they evenly spread it and don't get tons of glue. But I find that I really need some extra glue with these vanes because they're just so small. So I just make the smallest bead that I possibly can along the full length of the vane, and then I'll show you what I do. How do I get it down? So I'm sorry, I'm gonna make sure I get it on. I'm not gonna center it up on the camera, so bear with me here. So I got it, a perfect bead down the vane. Now, all you do is slide it up against it, and then I give it a little bit of extra help and push the vane. I grab it on both sides like this with my fingers and push it towards the shaft, just to make sure, because the base is so thin that I really got to make sure I'm getting contact, otherwise it's not going to stick. With a regular compound vane, this jig is so easy to fletch. You just slap them on, wait 20 seconds, pull it off, go to the next vane. You don't even have to wait till it fully cures. So again, I'm just squeezing it against the shaft, making sure it's got good contact, and then just kind of helping it just to make sure I'm getting contact. And something cool that I like about this is, you can't quite see it. If I push on the jig, I can see it from here. There's a little bit of glue. You can see the glue in between the wire and the shaft just smushing down, and I'm getting full glue coverage all the way down, even a little bit on the edges of the vanes. So for me, I can't tell you how much I like this jig compared to a Bitzenberger, especially when I'm fletching the wave vanes. It just makes it so much easier, a lot less messy. because it controls the glue. It doesn't allow it to go all over the place. With the bits, you can just clamp it where there's a line. You can see in person, I don't know, yeah, you can see it. There's a line down there, and I'll put the clamp right there. I won't put it all the way to the base. It makes it a little easier to fletch. Distance the vanes in the knock groove. There is vane testing that I've done a little bit, not enough to really come up with anything yet. But yes, and mine are an inch from the groove of the knock, or no, they're 7/8 of an inch, and it from the groove of the knock to the back of the vane. Do I use arrow wraps? No, because it adds weight to the back of the shaft. Compound, they benefit from that, so you know, all the power to them. Go for it. So as you can see, I just pull it away, it pops off and slides. I spin it to the next click. Now I'm ready. I will just wipe it just in case, because I do get a little bit of glue residue on it, and it really helps it prevent it from sticking to the next vane. So I spin it. I'm gonna do my arrows red, white, and blue. AE sent me a lifetime supply for the Olympics. There's a little misunderstanding as to where I would be when, so they had to send 2 shipments to me, so I have a lifetime supply of red, white, and blue, so I'm going to do my best to use them up eventually. But again, just put it in there in the same place. I give it a little bit of room so it sticks up past the wires, just a touch, so that way I make sure I'm getting the contact on the vane first instead of the wires first. Just run another bead. Slap it on. Again, I help it. That one I added a little bit too much glue, so it might stick a little bit to the clamp. Do I weigh out each of the components and try to match them for arrow weight? That way your arrows are more consistent in the weight. No, I don't do that, because the heavier components and the lighter arrow. Why would I take a heavy point and put it in a lighter arrow? Because it would make that arrow more weak. For me, I think it's a little bit more consistent to just make all the points the same, all the knocks exactly the same, all the pins exactly the same, and then glue them all in the arrows, and then just take the arrows for what they are. If they're a little bit heavy or a little bit light, I don't shoot them. I shoot the arrows that are more consistently closer together than the next arrow. Because for me, I think tune is a little bit more sensitive, or potentially could cause some issues, especially forgiveness when you make a slightly different shot here or there. So I tend to not put the heaviest point in the lightest arrow to make all the arrows weigh the same. I'd rather just make all the points the same, make all the pins the same, glue them in, weigh the arrows, and you know, ultimately have some practice arrows and have some tournament arrows. Renee, yeah, I'll do Vine spine testing on my spine checker, the Ram spine checker, and do spine checking as well as straightness checking, and do that before I even shoot the arrows, and I'll bare shaft select them. So I'll shoot all bare shafts at 30 meters, plot them all, and grab the arrows that group closer together. I really only do that before World Championships and before the Olympics, because it takes a lot of time, and it definitely gives me a mental edge because I feel like I have an advantage. So I'm just waiting a handful of seconds to make sure it stays. I'm going to pull it off slowly. Pops right off. Spin it to the next one. So I did get a little bit of excess glue. I can see it on the base. The lighting's a little rough. So, and I did get glue on the wire, so I'm just going to wipe it off. I just used the same wipe, arrow wipe that I used to clean the shaft. Again, it's Max Clean arrow wipes. They are great. It's like a baby wipe that's in a package. Super simple. And again, another color. Go red, white, and blue. Again, put it in exactly the same. In the same spot. The same height. It's all about repetition. It's all about doing it the same. Try to glue the same amount. Get some good contact. Again, I'm helping it from either side. You don't have to do this at all with compound vanes because they are so large. The bases are so large. And the base will totally get in the way of the wires, whereas these bases and these vanes are so thin that the wire will actually and can actually touch before the base of the vane. So by doing this, I'm really just making sure the base of the vane is getting contact before I let it sit for, you know, maybe 30 seconds or so. And once there's very little space between the vane and the shaft with this, you know, these max bond or, you know, fast drying glues, I just it's like 15 seconds, 20 seconds on either side, or, you know, for each vane. So it's really easy. Let's see here. I assume you don't find any difference between different color wave vanes. No, absolutely no difference. There is no difference in spine or stiffness or weight or anything like that. Now, as far as other companies, there is a slight difference, but I've shot every color imaginable on different types of vanes, and they're all about the same. You know, they say, oh, you got to shoot all the same color on spin wings. Yeah, I mean, that's true. But I've shot 2 vane spin wings or spin wings that are torn up and things like that in the past, and they still hit the same spot. I wouldn't shoot them like that in a competition, but I don't know. I don't know if it really matters. Then again, you know, people would probably say the same thing about fletching arrows to spin the exact way that comes out of the bow. But I don't know. I mean, I try not to. When I was shooting spin wings, when I shot them in a competition, they were the same color. So no, there's no Florian. There's no difference between putting the weak side or the stiff side to the plunger. It's all up to you. It's individual. It's what you want to do. Just do it consistently, regardless of how you do it. I mean, I find when I spine check them, I find the stiffest spot of the arrow, but then I also write down the spine variance around the whole arrow, and then also write down the spine stiffness at the stiffest spot. So I always pick the ones that are the closest, that are almost exactly the same stiffness in the stiff spot with the least amount of variance, or at least a consistent amount of variance between arrows. So the starting point of the fletching on the arrow should end up away from the bow. Hopefully I fletched this arrow right. If not, it's going to end up being a bare shaft. I'll cut it off and leave the bases, or just refletch it. But it should be good. Yep. So before the glue dries, wipe it off. But I'll show you guys what 8 to 8.5 degrees of helical looks like. So I put the red one down. So if I'm using the line, there's the left line. It'll be away from the plunger. Now that's a lot of spin. That's about the most amount of spin I can get out of a recurve, out of a wave vane, and get full contact. But look at the vane base is perfectly perpendicular all the way down the shaft. See how it's perfectly perpendicular all the way down in the back and in the front. See that? So if I'm getting full contact perpendicular, that means it's got full adhesion all the way around. You can't get that with other jigs. I promise you, I've tried them, especially with these vanes. It's just tricky. So yeah, so with that, I mean, the tutorial's pretty much done, but I'll take some questions, you know, especially specific to this type of stuff. Let's see, for super glue, there are some special tips to put on the tip, like a syringe. Yeah, I've seen that, and I've tried to use them, but they don't work for the bottles that I have. You know, AAE is nice enough to sponsor me and send me stuff that I can use, so, I mean, I go with what I got. I don't worry about the, you know, a little bit of issue there. So let me try to level this camera. It's bothering me. There we go. Let's see. How do I tune or turn the nocks so vanes rotate so they don't touch anything? If you have the right tune, the dynamic flexing of the arrow will not touch anything out of a recurve, because as the arrow really only touches the bow from here to here. If you look on high-speed video, the arrow is flexing, and as it's flexing, it's actually bending away from the bow by the time this passes the plunger. And I actually get about maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of clearance past my my plunger with my vanes. So I don't have any even worries. Like I said, I put the red one down, so I'll index it, and I'm off just a touch, but I'm going to be off just a touch on exactly the same way of all the same vanes. So there's the camera. Let me get it to focus. That's how I index them for so this is the plunger side for a recurve. Obviously, you can put them, perfectly outwards, but I tend to go down. I think I get a little bit more clearance that way, and a little bit more consistency. Do I notice any difference between using left and right helical? Yes, when I have done the testing before I've actually checked the normal rotation in my bow, because Greg Poole was smart enough and kind enough to give me this little tip, but I shot, right versus left spin wings, or right versus left helical waves. I couldn't figure out why I was shooting better with the lefts over the rights. And all I did, I showed you earlier in the thing, the plot charts, and I just did a right versus left helical, and the lefts grouped better than the rights, and it ended up being because the arrows naturally rotated left, so they didn't have to. They come out of the bow rotating, well, for you guys, this way, counterclockwise. So the Vane also spun it counterclockwise and kept that rotation going that direction. If the arrow normally comes out counterclockwise and then you're trying to spin the arrow clockwise, why would you want to stop an arrow's natural rotation to have it spin back the other way? Difference in poundage, different degrees of helical. I think so. Especially in forgiveness, youth arrows, you're going to get better up close. You'll get better performance with a little bit more drag, at least a little bit more forgiveness with a little bit more drag, more spin. But as you start going out to further distances, you start losing kinetic energy at the far distances, so you start actually degrading performance. You got to pay attention. Just watch the arrows fly through some binoculars, and then you can start making adjustments whether you're using too much or not enough helical. You want the arrow to fly in a nice fashion like this. You don't want the arrow to come out, reach its maximum altitude, and then fly down like this, or fly as it's coming out of the bow. Yeah, it's flying great, but then towards the end of the flight, it starts parachuting. Too much drag. It's again why I would never recommend the elite spin wings unless you're shooting maybe 20 yards, because then you got enough downrange velocity that you're not going to degrade performance with some parachuting. Short tips, indoor vanes, feathers. I use feathers because typically the indoor arrows that I shoot are bigger, so if I put vanes on it, I'm going to have less chance for clearance. So if I get contact with a feather, it's so light, it just bends and moves out of the way, and I don't even worry about it. It also has a lot more drag than I can get. I get a ton of spin by using a ton of helical. I always use left helical, left wing. Always right helical, right wing. Never cross the two. Just choose what you want for the spin, and I find I get better clearance with a left wing, left helical out of a right-handed bow, but also my bow normally and naturally rotates the arrow counterclockwise, so the left wing works better for me. Any more questions? If there's no more questions, I can end it here. Yeah, if you have a spin type vane, like a spider vane or whatever else, you can offset it. So do the same testing that I did. Use plot charts, shoot the same exact arrow side by side with another one, shoot 6 of each for a total of 12 arrows, plot them all, mix them up. Maybe always start with one for half the day and then switch it for the other day, or just grab a random arrow out of your quiver like I did, and then plot them. And you can figure out, okay, is straight working or is offset working or not. But like I said, in my testing for me, the wave vanes just flat out outshot everything. So yeah, that's why I end up going that way. But I guess I'll end it there. I appreciate everybody for coming out. I got to thank my sponsors. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do this for you guys. So Win and Win, Excel Sights, True Ball, AAE stabilizers, Easton Arrows, Lancaster Archery Supply, Loophole Optics. Let's see, who else? Last Chance Archery, they sent me the jig a couple years ago. Reinhardt targets. Viscosity bowstrings. Let's see here. Rock tape. Yeah, there's a lot these days now, which I'm very grateful for. Hey Larry, how's it going? Love you too. You going to China? Hopefully I'll see you guys there. Tried using the AE Max. Yeah, it's too heavy. It doesn't shoot well out of a recurve. It works great. You shoot really well, but it's just not forgiving. So, but yeah, I'll leave it there, guys. And you know, I apologize if I forgot any of my sponsors, and I will not forget you next time. And yeah, like I said, I appreciate the support. Oh, and Wilderness Athlete, I forgot to thank them. I appreciate the support of everybody coming out and doing these videos with me. I will post it on my YouTube channel. If you haven't, or you're interested in my book, it is available for pre-sale right now on jakekaminski.com. It's on pre-order at Lancaster Archery Supply, Quicks Archery. I don't know if AAE is accepting orders yet, but they have the exclusive pre-launch release at the Arizona Cup at their booth. So if you want a book, stop by there, grab a book. They're $24.99 at the booth. I think $25. They're just going to make it simple. And I'm going to do a couple signings there. The guys that have pre-ordered on my website, they're going out real soon. I'm working on signing them. And yes, Lancaster ships worldwide, working on JVD and some other companies too that'll be carrying it. But again, the official launch is April 10th. But at the Arizona, that's Monday after Arizona Cup. But if you're at Arizona Cup, they'll be available at the AAE booth. So stop by there, grab them. And yeah, or you can pre-order them at Lancaster, Quicks. Eventually they'll be at JVD, and they are for sale right now on my website, jakekaminski.com. They will be, or you can click the Shop Now button here in my Facebook page. There's going to be available on Amazon as well, available like on Kindle and digital download and things like that. So anyway, everybody, I appreciate it. Thanks for the support, and take care.